Welcome, and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Steve Schmalz, the Field Chief Technology Officer for Federal at RSA. Steve, thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Zero trust is one of those topics that is just so broad. So I think just to hear it from your perspective here, what does zero trust mean for you guys over at RSA?
Well, it's a sort of a guiding concept. Zero trust means that you can't trust anybody, anywhere, anytime. And the idea is that if before you give access to a resource, you need to make sure that the person getting access to that resource or the process is who it claims it is, and that they should actually have a right to see and use that resource. So I think it's worth maybe going into what I think is sort of the best discussion of zero trust as it might actually be applied conceptually. So NIST has a very good special pub, which I'm sure almost everybody listening to this has or watching this has seen. It's the special pub 827, which is their zero trust architecture. And what's nice about this document is it very quickly gets to the core of what zero trust means when you're implementing zero trust. And it means that the place where you make those decisions about who gets access to what, where you make those policy decisions, needs to be as close to the resource as possible. And then it goes through and within a network architecture and discusses, all the things you need to do to make that work. So as important as it is to have that PDP, the policy decision point or the policy enforcement point close to the resource, you need to support that to give it all the services it needs, to make sure that you implement strong authentication, multi-factor authentication for an individual, and that you go through the right process to determine if the individual should have access to that resource. And of course, there's even more that goes around making sure that the right access is granted to the right person. You need to be able to monitor that network. You need to be able to take quick actions if you see anything going wrong. So zero trust is a guiding concept, I think is really well defined in Special Pub 827. And we at RSA use it as our guide as we try to help our customers meet their zero trust goals.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's a great way to frame the conversation here. How can RSA help its customers meet its zero trust goals? Everyone's obviously on a different point in that learning curve.
Yes, well, again, going back to that sort of policy enforcement or policy decision point, you need a vendor that can provide flexible authentication solutions, flexible access management, can provide governance around that, making sure that you make the right decisions of who should have access to what, and someone who can fit into the various environments. Sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that sort of one size fits all. And if you're looking at a zero trust environment, it may be that in certain situations, getting access to some legacy resource, you just don't have all the options for authentication options, and that you need to be flexible and you need to use something that fits that particular environment. And the same thing goes when you're looking at the sort of the threat that environment might be under. Sometimes you might be concerned about the authenticator itself being an attack vector, and you don't want to have to insert the token, let's say, into the laptop, let's say, that you might be trying to get access to, right? In other cases, you might be transporting the authentication across multiple networks, and you may need to lock something down with authentication functionality like FIDO or CAC or PIV. So in one case, a one-time password securely implemented in a standalone token might be the right solution. In another case, FIDO might be perfect. It really depends on what you're doing in the environment you're working in. And so we at RSA, we feel like we need to make sure that we give our customers options to implement all of that, not only to implement it on, sort of in these one-off scenarios, but to manage those implementations in a holistic approach, to give them the infrastructure to support it and make sure that their users are at least dealing with the same interfaces as much as possible, even if they're using different authentication options. So that is sort of the core of one of the things that we really try to bring to the table when we're providing, helping customers, meet their zero trust goals. The other is that it's so important. It doesn't really matter how well you authenticate an individual if that individual gets access to something they shouldn't have access to. So you have to make sure that in the back end, you make sure to decide who should have access to what. You put the governance around determining that people are seeing what they should see. So, try to keep it. What often happens in an organization where, you're given access to see one resource, and maybe you're doing role based, and you start adding more and more functionality or more and more data into that particular pool of sensitive information, and suddenly you have sort of mission creep, as people in DoD might call it, and individuals who should only be seeing a small set of the data that's available get to see everything. So you need to make sure that you control access to data, not just through the authentication process, but by making sure that you keep track of who has access to what they see, and that you fine tune that process. RSA tries to make sure, RSA offers solutions that help our customers do that as well.
Okay, got it. And of course, the technology is such a fundamental, foundational element of getting zero trust right. How do cloud services fit into a broader strategy around zero trust? How can that be an asset to organizations trying to make zero trust a reality?
Yeah, going back to sort of my description of zero trust, and that core being making sure that a policy decision or policy enforcement point is as close to the asset as possible. I mean that in a logical sense, right? You don't want to give any room for the attacker to get in between the point where you're saying, this is who I think you are, and yeah, you have access to this. Cloud services can help you there, in the sense that they can offload a lot of the work that organizations have to do to keep their authentication and access management infrastructure up and running. A cloud service can keep the software up to date, can make sure it's available, can make sure that you have, again, that consistent interface, not only for the users, but for the people doing the administration. And that allows the security people to do the job they should be doing, which is to make decisions on what authentication should be used in what situation, to monitor the networks, to put that identity governance in place. So I think that the cloud is extremely important, as long as the cloud is implemented in a way that meets the organization's security posture. So within the federal government, we have FedRAMP, and FedRAMP was built for this very situation. It basically said, look, if we're going to have these service providers providing functionality to agencies, we need to find a way to make sure that the cloud security posture matches the security posture, the FISMA posture, as most of your listeners will understand, for that government agency. So what we're going to do is we're going to put together a set of controls, and we're going to put classes of controls together that allow companies to claim a certain level of security. But then we're going to let them work with the government customer to show the government customer that the controls they have in place actually meet that particular customer's security posture. That's called the ATO process, authority to operate. So FedRAMP is perfect for that. RSA has FedRAMP moderate, and we're looking to move up to FedRAMP high as our customers let us know sort of what their needs and requirements are. And knowing that as an organization that our cloud service is already positioned to meet their security needs, I think is extremely important. So again, cloud services can do wonders in helping you meet your zero trust goals, but you need to make sure that the cloud services you use are secure. FedRAMP is an excellent process by which you can do that, and RSA is committed to supporting that with our product releases as we go forward.
Okay, great. Well, understandably, this is a conversation that has covered a lot of ground here. What are some of the key takeaways that you'd like to leave with our audience before we close things up here?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing to remember when you look at zero trust is that you can't go and buy zero trust from anybody. I just came back from the RSA conference, and you couldn't walk around the RSA floor to the hundreds of vendors there and walk up to one of them and say, "I'll take your zero trust solution. Just tell me what I need and we'll be fine." Zero trust is a journey, and you need to work with multiple vendors to achieve your zero trust goals. We at RSA, around identity access, identity governance, we think provides you with those key tools to meet those particular requirements within a zero trust architecture. And as long as you realize that zero trust is a journey and that it's not something you can pick up off the shelf, then I think that that you'll be fine, and you can help that. You can use this zero trust concept and the concept of a zero trust architecture to guide your organization and to meet the threats as they arise, and continue to demand of your vendors that we do the same thing, that we make sure that that we meet the security requirements you have, so that your zero trust journey is as effective as possible.
All right, a strong note to end on there. I'd like to thank today's guest, Steve Schmalz, the Field Chief Technology Officer for Federal at RSA. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Zero Trust Cyber Exchange.